In today's conversation, I would like to discuss with you living God realization. Living God realization. As I always teach, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual are one. It's not this versus that, it's this and that in perfect harmony. Inner and outer are one. It's not inner versus outer, inner and outer as one in perfect harmony. So the way it plays out is what we can describe as flow. Everything and everyone appears to be in harmony with you. So what generates then the confusion that it is not this way, that everything just is this way, the way we describe? Everything and everyone appears to be in harmony. It is the conditioning stored in the subconscious mind that is generating I like to call it, distortions of reality. We distort reality unknowingly through identification to particular beliefs of lack or limitation. The way we dissolve these beliefs is, as we've been discussing, and if you haven't seen the video, I'll link to it, the Neville Goddard conversation, knowing that I am nothing and I am everything. That is prior to any of these conditions in mind. Now, being as you are, the conditions naturally fall away. Or as I say sometimes, conditions fall away in flow. They naturally dissolve. The programming, the conditions, the thoughts of limitations, you no longer identify with them in flow. Or as I also say sometimes, these thoughts appear to disappear. So, the individual then experiences all things being in harmony. This is the realist of the real, we can say it that way, the realist experience. See, the individual may have formed conditioning in mind. I came across this through Thinking Grow Rich in 2004 in a chapter, the Subconscious Mind chapter. And he spoke about how these conditions distort reality. In another chapter, he had a section called 6 Basic Fears. One of them was fear of criticism. Fear of criticism. This was a big one for me. I had in my mind a lot of conditioning. And the way it would play out was prior to doing something that I really wanted to do, what I genuinely desired to do, I would look around to see if other people are looking at me. Now, sometimes I would actually physically look around to see what other people are doing or thinking, which doesn't make any sense because we think what they think, as in we're the only thinker in mind. But I would look around to see what other people were doing, and based on what they were doing, then I would act based on whatever kind of condition in mind. So, in other words, I was identified with fear of criticism. I would not allow myself to act the way I genuinely desired to act. I would not allow myself to do what I genuinely desired to do. And if I did do something, as we were saying growing up, I would half-step it. I wouldn't fully commit to it. So, dissolving this conditioning in mind, what happened was a lot of things. As you know, I moved up in my corporate career. I got out of $50,000 debt. I built 3 successful businesses. My personal life, everything changed because I started to do what I genuinely desired to do. And I would not look around to see what other people were doing before I would do what I genuinely desired to do. It doesn't make any sense to do that because only we think what they think. Since we're the only thinker in mind, we can only think what people think. Right now, for example, as we're having this conversation, you are thinking what this means to you, perhaps, or maybe not. And you can form whatever kind of conditioning thus in your mind. You can form whatever kind of programming in your mind. It's up to you. What I found to be really helpful was to dissolve that conditioning. As I mentioned, looking around to what other people are doing before you act. That if you do the thing that you love to do, that means you're a bad person, or whatever kind of limitation. And again, I, as the individual, have a mind. You have a mind. So you could really think for yourself. But in that moment, it felt like that fear of criticism, which again arises from the programming, the conditions in mind, hijacked me, and I started to behave that way. Now, we know that it doesn't actually hijack you. I could describe it that way back in the days, but it doesn't actually hijack you. So you are prior to all these things. As I mentioned, I am everything and I am nothing. And why this is key is if I am everything, then who apart from me can suggest that I can't be the way I genuinely desire to be? If all fundamentally is the self, then is the self in conflict with the self? That doesn't make any sense. It only appears that way through conditioning in mind, through programming in mind. Now, if I say I am nothing, which is equally true as I am everything, then I don't need to impress anyone. I don't need to ask for approval or validation. I don't need to look for confirmation of being that which I desire to be. Everything naturally and effortlessly happens in flow. Now, for many years, I would say, make flow a priority. And one of the reasons that I would say that is conditions or this programming dissolves in flow. I didn't know this back in the days. In the earlier stages, I would apply auto-suggestion, and it was very helpful. But then I discovered that if I can just be as I am in flow, practically be as I am in flow, these conditions would fall away on their own. So I started to say that more often, make flow a priority. So then I started to say things like, you could do nothing to be as you are. Why would I say that? Because flow is the natural result of being who you are. Being who you are is the natural result of knowing who you are. And by who you are, I speak of you prior to all these conditions. That I am nothing, that I am everything. And from that sure foundation, as I mentioned earlier, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual are experienced as one. And they are consistently experienced as one. So not just experienced as one in a meditation, experienced as one in relation to the various initiatives. For example, in entrepreneurship, I segmented accordingly. Innovation, sales, marketing, operations, finance, and leadership. And then I always say that you can optimize these areas, automate, you can delegate, or you can eliminate. And I mentioned to bring in business. The key initiatives are prospecting, lead generation, client acquisition, and ongoing business with existing clients. And then I also mentioned that what plays a role in business can be segmented as follows: physical assets, digital assets, intangible assets, and relationships. Now, if I say these things, an individual, based on conditioning, may say things like, this sounds like a lot of work. I need to do all these things. This seems very force-based. That's just conditioning in mind. God does everything. By that it is meant, practically speaking, for the individual, all these areas are taken care of naturally and effortlessly, spontaneously in flow. You naturally start conversations in prospecting without force because there is no separation. You naturally generate leads in your style of generating leads. Your style of prospecting is the best style. Your style of lead generation is the best style. You naturally acquire clients without trying to force or convince the prospect or lead into becoming a client because there is no separation. There is only God. So why, in the moment of sales conversations or prospecting or lead generation, is there all of a sudden an illusion of separation between one individual and another individual? Well, that's the conditioning. As mentioned, that conditioning is stored in the subconscious mind. So you can dissolve that conditioning and experience what is called no mind, or as we talked about in a recent video, mushin no shin, mind without mind, where the intention to grow the business is spontaneously playing out as theater. So the prospect plays a role, the lead plays a role, the client plays a role, and even the relationships with existing clients can result in ongoing business with existing clients. And why do I say that? Well, from personal experience, I found that made up a large chunk of the millions of dollars that were generated over the years. And not just with myself, but also the many businesses that I work with. Now, as I mentioned, if I say things like innovation, sales, operations, finance, leadership, optimization, automation, delegation, elimination, in part or in whole or in combination, prospecting, lead generation, client acquisition, ongoing business with existing clients, a person may think they have to do all these things. Well, I've seen this happen in my own businesses and also working with thousands of clients over the years. They may find a partner, this spontaneously, and even that word find a partner, the partner naturally shows up. They naturally show up. Everything naturally shows up when you know that I am everything. I am nothing. No conditions in mind. No mind. Or even more accurate, no interference patterns generated by the programming or the conditioning in mind. So then the entrepreneur experiences, as I mentioned, a flow-based journey to actualizing their vision rather than one of stress, force, confusion, doubt. Stress, force, confusion, doubt is generated by conditioning in mind, and you can dissolve that conditioning in flow. As I mentioned in the earlier stages, I would apply autosuggestion to dissolve that conditioning, which was helpful. Then I discovered that I could just be in flow, and the conditioning would dissolve. And so I made flow a priority, and I teach just be in flow. But that could sound like a thing to do. Flow is the natural result of knowing who you are prior to these conditions and abiding as you are prior to these conditions. And so the way I dissolve these conditions is not identifying with the thoughts that suggest otherwise, that suggest lack, that suggest limitation, that suggests not being that which I desire to be, that suggests not having that which I desire, because you are already that, which you could say it that way if you would like, at the highest frequency, the highest state, the highest vibration. Whatever way you say it, you are that which is prior to all these concepts, as perfection, as everything, as nothing at the same time. So it's not everything versus nothing, or nothing versus everything. They are both in perfect harmony with each other. So everything emerges out of nothing. In the beginning it says in Genesis 1:3, and God said, the light shall be, and the light was. God created the world out of nothing. Now it also says in the Bible, be ye imitators of God as dear children. And as there's only God, there's no way to imitate God then. But why does the Bible say it that way? It says it that way to release the conditioning in mind, the illusions of separation from being, the illusions of separation which can appear, as mentioned, as the individual afraid to start the conversation with the prospect, afraid to do the lead generation. And they may even think when they hear these kinds of things that they need to, they must, they should do these things. All these things happen naturally, effortlessly, and spontaneously. And as Steve Jobs had mentioned in his commencement speech, we connect the dots looking backwards, and then we see how it worked out. And then we may even create marketing models, business models, etc. But that doesn't mean that my business model or how I market, or how I sell, or how I prospect is the way that you should do it. Your way is the best way. The truth is thy lamp. You get the answers within. Appearances may seem to suggest, seeming suggestions, that you need to do this or that in order to grow your business. Yet you can really think for yourself because, as I had mentioned, you are the only thinker in mind, and it is you within that is relating to the appearances. Another reason why I'm discussing this now and saying, I am nothing, I am everything. As mentioned, flow is the natural result. Naturally, you end up in flow. You could say it that way. Everything flows. No resistance, no conditions. Conditions fall away. Thoughts appear to disappear if they suggest otherwise. Another benefit of this is that you do see that the opportunities that were always there naturally emerge. The prospects and whatever kind of prospecting way you go about doing things naturally emerges. Lead generation and whatever way you go about lead generation naturally emerges. You connect the dots looking backwards, and then you say, okay, this is how I did it. You may write a book on it, like I did. And even when I wrote my book, I was very clear in there to not suggest that you need to do it my way. The book is more of an exploratory conversation. If you're interested in that, I'll link in the description to it. Just like how we have exploratory conversations in our school community. If you're interested in that, I'll link in the description to it. I know that everybody knows the way. The truth is thy lamp. We just choose to be as we are and actualize, or another way of saying it is, you know that you are completely fulfilled in the silence. If I am nothing, which I am nothing, if I am everything, which I am everything, then I am completely fulfilled and I need nothing. And since I am nothing, then I am completely fulfilled in that regard as well. And from the sure foundation of being completely fulfilled, these conditions in mind, the patterns, the programming in mind just fall away because they do not represent you. Do they represent you if they suggest that you can't do something because you're afraid of criticism? That doesn't make any sense anymore. Those conditions just fall away. You just do it because you're not attached to whatever happens next. So what happens is everything naturally and spontaneously arises and you just flow. Now, along the way, you optimize. As I mentioned, optimization, automation, delegation, elimination. And even those, for example, in your business who assist in the optimization, automation, delegation, elimination, they naturally show up as consultants or agencies or business partners or friends or mastermind group, etc. You see, all these things that could sound like things to do only appear as things to do based on conditioning in mind. They spontaneously, naturally happen. You're just naturally going to do what you genuinely desire to do, effortlessly in flow without the conditions. So you dissolve the conditioning anytime that thought arises in mind prior to identification that suggests you need to do this to have that. Illusory. I am everything. Or I need to do this or that in order to be X, Y, Z to impress this person. I am nothing. Instant, right away, no mind. And then what spontaneously arises from that is what you do from the heart of awareness, what you don't do, what you say, what you don't say. As I say sometimes, everything spontaneously and naturally, effortlessly happens in flow, spontaneously, naturally. Being and doing are one. Or as Mihai Csikszentmihalyi talked about in the book Flow, he called it, actions and awareness are one. They are one. It's not like awareness and action are separate. They are one. Everything spontaneously, naturally, effortlessly happens in flow. As I mentioned, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, they are one. There's no spiritual versus mental, mental versus spiritual, physical versus emotional. That just generates conflict. To think that way, dissolve that illusory thought that suggests that they are separate. See them as one, as they are one. Ultimately, there's only God, playing all roles in perfect harmony. And not just for the individual, everything and everyone. To prove it in equation that it is this way, dissolve the conditioning in mind, if there is conditioning in mind, that suggests any of the 6 basic fears. They were fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of old age, fear of death, fear of loss of love of someone, and fear of ill health. It's these kinds of conditions in mind that generate the resistance of the individual doing what they love to do. As I always say, and Steve Jobs had also said it in his commencement speech, I used to listen to it over and over again when I was building my IT business. He said, follow your heart and intuition. Everything else is secondary. Do what you love to do. Now, doing what you love to do, everything gets taken care of. You play the perfect role when you do what you love to do. You do what you love to do, and everyone appears to do what they love to do. And it's interesting, it's not just the people that appear to play the perfect role doing what they love to do. It's also, as mentioned, the digital assets, the physical assets, the intangible assets. Digital assets is whatever kind of technology, software, videos, etc. Everything appears to be in harmony with you. Practically speaking, the right video shows up at the right time. The physical assets, whatever is required for the business, a car, real estate, etc., those naturally, spontaneously happen, inflow. I mentioned the story, I just recently got a property in Blue Mountains, Ontario. The agent that did the deal for me, it just spontaneously happened. It used to be an Airbnb I used to stay at back in the days. I remember asking the owner of the property if he was interested in selling his place back then. And how interesting that 5 years later I ended up buying the place. He didn't say that he was going to sell the property back then, but it all just spontaneously happened. The agent that did the deal for me, he's a member of Flow-Based Prosperity, my group coaching and mastermind service, Zor. Shout out to Zor. So now everything was in close proximity. Or we could say it this way, everything appears to be in synchronicity. So he was there, the opportunity showed up, the market had dropped for real estate, and everything just aligned perfectly. It has gotten easier to apply this over the years and experience these things because over the years, all I did was just dissolve the conditioning, which is why I teach dissolve the conditioning. See, you are already that which you desire to be. You already have what you desire. Neville Goddard, Joseph Murphy, Florence Scovel Shinn, Napoleon Hill, they all say the same thing. They know the spiritual truth that you are already that which you desire to be, that you have what you desire. And what happens is the illusions that you are not, they just fall away. You just release the conditions in mind, the programming in mind, and that's it. You're already at, we can say it that way, as mentioned, the highest frequency, the highest vibration, the highest state of consciousness. You are already that. You don't need to do something in order to get there. You're already that. You just no longer identify with illusions, which are the illusory thoughts that suggest otherwise. And then it appears more and more so with increasing frequency on a continuous basis. It just continues to appear more so. You see these things happen. That is how we practically live God realization. We describe the experience as flow. And if you think, you really think for yourself. If you move, you unhesitatingly make the move. As mentioned, growing up, we used to call it half-stepping. No such thing as half-stepping in flow. You full step, and that's not a force-based thing to do. You naturally take the step. And also, in relation to every step you take, the world dances with you. So inner and outer are not seen in conflict with each other. They're experienced as one. The way I can describe it is I take a step, and then this other person takes the step, or this asset appears all of a sudden. And I also mentioned intangible assets. So knowledge, wisdom, expertise, all that naturally arises. You already have knowledge, wisdom, expertise, and everyone already has enough knowledge, wisdom, expertise, reference experience, stories, etc. They just all appear to play a role in perfect harmony. So one way that it plays out that way is joint ventures, partnerships, collaborative deals. An example would be the conversation that I had with Danielle Lin. If you haven't seen it, I'll link in the description. We were driving over to Venice Beach. We're just hanging out. And we said, you know what? Let's record our conversation. We always have these kinds of conversations. Why not record the conversation and share it with people? So we're just flowing in conversation, doing what we love to do. We love to talk about this stuff. And then we said, let's record it. And then I put it out as a YouTube video. I created a mind map, and then I captured the screen of me putting in the nuance points into the mind map. Effortless, joyous fun. One could say, you're working all day long, Joseph? Yeah, you could look at it that way. And not to throw a bias in it. As mentioned, your way is the best way. One of the ways it could look like is, right now I'm in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. So this is a different microphone that I'm using. and I'm out and about, and I'm hanging out with friends, and I'm doing the things that I love to do. Yet I'm also having interesting conversations, which are reflections of what we're talking about here. In this video, universally, all throughout this entire last handful of days that I've been here, the conversations have been about this. People have been experiencing it. Then you could say, oh, I have ideas now to put in my videos. And then I had a few ideas for my school community emerge. I put them into place. And even putting them into the place, the people were there. And also the technology was there to put it in place in an effortless way. So back in the days when I was identified with a lot of conditioning in mind, I would think I need to do all these things very force-based. So again, if I heard things like innovation, sales, marketing, operations, finance, leadership, or automation, delegation, optimization, elimination, or prospecting, lead generation, client acquisition, ongoing business with existing clients, I would think that's force-based, stress-based. I need to do all these things. I need to force myself to do all these things. No shame, no condemnation. That's just conditioning in mind. All of these things happen naturally, effortlessly, spontaneously in flow. So one of the things we've been talking about in the school community is how opportunities, you naturally seize opportunities in flow. You know, Sun Tzu, who wrote The Art of War, said something very interesting. He said, opportunities multiply as they are seized. Well, when we dissolve the condition of the programming or that belief that suggests I miss opportunities, you realize you never miss opportunities. That's illusory to suggest that. You never miss. And this is not the individual saying it and lying to themselves. No, you actually, it just plays out that way. You naturally, effortlessly seize the opportunities. And, as he said, they multiply when they are seized. So an example would be when I was building my IT business. The opportunity arose to reach out to someone on Facebook. I reached out to him, we met up for coffee, and we worked a referral deal. He was building websites, I was doing IT services. We agreed to refer business to each other for a percentage. He referred me to a steel company, and that steel company was giving me so much work that I had to hire my first contractor. My first contractor ends up being a close friend from high school who just so happens to be starting an IT business as well, although he wasn't doing the stuff that I was doing, and he wasn't interested in sales, and I like doing sales. So he was interested in just performing the services and building a team. And what happened? I had the opportunity to bring him on as a subcontractor. Now, the accountant at that particular firm saw the work that we're doing, and she was so happy with it that she said, I have a small office, we have a small team, would you be interested in doing IT services for us? And I said, yes. So we go over there, we do the IT services for her business, and she starts referring us to so many clients that we can say lead generation wasn't the bottleneck anymore. Then the next phase was to focus on operations and so forth. And by focus on operations, that could sound like a force-based thing to do. It's simply setting the intention that the natural way emerges and dissolving any conditions along the way. And one of the ways to get to the root of it, we can say it that way, dissolve all the conditioning, is to know that I am everything and I am nothing at the same time. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. You could say, I know that I am everything, I am nothing, thus I am completely fulfilled. From the sure foundation of being completely fulfilled, everything appears to be in harmony with me in a fulfilling way. People appear to be in harmony with me as I am in harmony with them. Environments appear to be in harmony with me as I am in harmony with environments. Everything appears to be in harmony with me as there is no separation. Thus, everything is in harmony, appearing more so with increasing frequency on a continuous basis as far as the senses perceive. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.